the QAnon stuff. Jim's QAnon. Well, let's look into that, because that could be really evil. Somewhere in Congress, they said QAnon is racist. Okay. We don't like that, right? But so is the Ku Klux Klan. And that's another letter. It's a K. We don't like the letter Q. We don't like the letter K, but they don't go after the letter K.
Stop it. Get some help.
Now, I don't know if you've heard of this Sound of Freedom movie. It's interesting. I know the usual suspects were like jumping on it, talking about it. So let's see what they have to say. I actually have not seen any of their videos on it. So let's see a little bit of what they had to say.
Sound of Freedom is shocking Hollywood in the mainstream media right now. This small budget movie that's based on a real story about child trafficking.
To my understanding, a lot of the story is fictionalized, but it's based on a real story, much in the same way Fargo is based on a real story.
And preventing child trafficking is doing incredible.
It's just a movie, dude. Relax. Like saying this movie is focused around preventing child trafficking is like saying that Taken is focused around, like, it's like anything you could say about this movie could also apply to Taken. I just kind of want to get his impression, but all right, I'm finding stuff I'm objecting with. Let's let him go a bit.
Things at the box office, despite the fact that it only cost $14 million to make, and there was barely any real promotion for this movie. It actually beat Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny on 4th of July.
Yeah, it did it for exactly one day. It was like Indiana Jones's 8th day and Sound of Freedom's first day, and then, yeah.
And all through the rest of the week, it's competed with the massive budget Disney movie, and on a per theater basis, it's actually annihilating them. But apparently, the message about, hey guys, human trafficking, child trafficking is a bad thing. Apparently, that is a political message now, because some people...
No, we'll get into the details about Sound of Freedom. Let's see what he says. But there's some sus stuff about this movie. Very, very suspicious. We covered a lot of it in the Fandom Initiative. I got some more stuff to go over, and there's a very interesting Jim Caviezel interview he did on Charlie Kirk's show that is very revealing.
People in the woke media are having an absolute meltdown over this movie. It's incredible to imagine that people are actually going out of their way to try to bash this thing. Human trafficking film Sound of Freedom trashed by liberal outlets as QAnon adjacent. Website Jezebel claimed at last QAnon Camp Appeal gets the cinematic exploration it demands. You saw places like Jezebel with headlines like that. You see The Guardian, Sound of Freedom, the QAnon adjacent thriller seducing America.
Jim Caviezel is QAnon. I mean, I actually put together that little pre-stream showing that he's pushing QAnon theories. He's QAnon.
Caviezel stars as a hero trying to stop child traffickers in a paranoid new movie turning into a surprise box office hit. The idea that this is just paranoid conspiracy theories. This is real. This is a real fucking story. Obviously, like all movies, there's probably a little bit of hyperbolization to some things to make it a little more entertaining. But in terms of the core of the story itself, it is real. Tim Ballard and his life, this is Operation Underground Railroad, right? They are an actual charitable organization that actually rescues children from slavery and child trafficking rings and things like that. This is a real thing. This is not some conspiracy theory.
Yeah, it's listen, has he saved children? Possibly, yes, but there's lots of controversy behind it. We're going to dive into this. There's some cringe behind this.
This is not some political movie. There's nothing to politicize about it, apparently, unless you're a far left-wing activist. It's pretty disgusting, and some of this...
So, Ryan, you do understand it's possible to criticize a lot of the aspects of this movie, mainly how it's getting its box office, where the money's coming from, and not support child trafficking. Those two are not mutually exclusive positions. You can be anti-child trafficking and still find this movie sus as fuck.
Stuff is very, very telling when you look out here. This is unreal, and DC Drano tags Jack Posobiec. Washington Post and Rolling Stone both praised Cuties. Both are now attacking Sound of Freedom. Well, look at Rolling.
That's a false dichotomy there. Cuties is a movie that I don't really want to dive into. I've never seen it. The promotion of it looked cringe. From the reviews I've actually heard about it, it says it's pretty much against the things that the promotion seemed to make it about, which I kind of believe. I believe that the overall themes of that movie are that it's against the things that it seems to advertise for, but the advertisement campaign and the rhetoric behind that movie, I'm not interested. But
Stone. Review, Sound of Freedom, the QAnon-tinged thriller about child trafficking, is designed to appeal to the conscience of conspiracy-addled boomers.
Well, we're going to get into that. We got some Jim Caviezel stuff to go into.
This is getting destroyed right now. There's Savannah Hernandez. 15,000 comments to less than 3,000 likes. They are getting roasted for this. Washington Post.
Okay, so you're on Twitter. I'm sorry. X. You're on X, which is quickly becoming just Nazi breeding ground. Frankly, that's what it is.
Was getting roasted for this. And yeah, here you can see there's Rolling Stone and what they say about a movie that's talking about combating human trafficking. Is
it possible to criticize a movie about child trafficking and not also support child trafficking? I'd like to think it is. I'd like to think you could do both those things. I think it's absolutely bizarre how it's like, hey, here's a movie that's anti-child trafficking, and then you criticize it. Oh, that must mean you're for it. No, of course not. It's such a weird take.
Saving child slaves, right? And then you have them talking about Cuties. Thanks to a major marketing mistake, the award-winning French movie Cuties was accused of sexualizing young girls. It's actually a sensitive portrait of the growing pains it deserves to be seen. Weird, right? Weird how they have those two opposing opinions. Washington Post, same thing, right? They're happy to defend Cuties, but then they say Sound of Freedom, the low-budget film about child sex trafficking, almost topped the box office, but its star Jim Caviezel's linked it to the QAnon movement.
He is.
It is laughable, the attacks that are going on right now. Here's Washington Post. They're getting ratio on theirs as well. The attacks are low and they are pathetic, but it's exactly what so many people apparently...
Ryan, do you want to address the fact that Jim Caviezel's pretty out there QAnon? He's pretty frank about it.
Would expect. Some of the woke freaks out there, including the mainstream media, will apparently stop at nothing to try to bring this movie down.
And you will stop at nothing to bring down Indiana Jones, because it's weird that you feel the need to compare it to Indiana Jones, a movie that made, let's be frank, Indiana Jones 5 has made vastly more money than Sound of Freedom. It's not even close. So I think it's weird how you're like, how dare you bash Sound of Freedom? Watch me as I bash Indiana Jones 5. Okay? Dude, like, bashing stuff is like your bread and butter. And the fact is, you bash it for stupid shit. Like, there's a prominent woman in it, or there's a person of color in it. People are bashing Sound of Freedom. Honestly, I haven't seen that many people actually bash the actual quality of the movie. They're bashing the company behind it, Angel Studios. They're bashing the star for clearly being QAnon. The actual quality of the film is not something I've seen bashed on really at all. I'm sure it exists, but not really prominent.
To try to say, oh, you really shouldn't go see it because of this. It's really linked to all these things. This is not a political movie. And even though there is some...
Yes, but there's definitely political linkage to this movie. Angel Studios and Jim Caviezel, Tim Ballard, they definitely have links to political movements.
Faith-based stuff in it. It's not like, I wouldn't even call it a Christian movie or anything like that. But obviously, with what it's doing at the box office, way overperforming expectations, then on a per-theater basis, destroying...
And we're going to look at some of those, what it's doing at the box office, because it's interesting.
Indiana Jones, I'm sure a lot of people in Hollywood might be...
I'm still waiting for these guys to release videos talking about how Barbie is destroying Sound of Freedom. Barbie is absolutely crushing it.
Freaking out a little bit about this. Maybe that explains why some people in the media have come out so hard against it. I highly recommend, if you have an opportunity to go see this movie, I'm going to see it this weekend. Apparently it's very heavy, but a very powerful message. That's not a conspiracy, it's reality. These things are actually happening.
So he's just advertising for this movie. That's kind of... strange.
Happening out there in the world. It's not a political thing. It shouldn't be a political thing, but for some reason, some people are trying to make it into that. Let me know what you think about all this in the comments section.
Okay, so essentially the anti-fans, Fandom Menace, whatever you want to call them, they've come out and said, Sound of Freedom's great. Everybody should watch it. Everybody go check it out. Okay, so people have pointed out this video on TikTok, and I think it'll be interesting to look at it. So here's a sold-out theater for Sound of Freedom.
There's no one in here. And then it said that they were sold out. This is ridiculous.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? It's a sold-out theater, but there's no one in there. That's interesting. Now, here's a tweet I saw about somebody showing the ticket sales for Sound of Freedom that, again, I thought was interesting. So you can see the gray dots are sold seats and the blue dots are the available seats. Isn't that weird? Like, who goes to a movie theater and says, I'm going to go ahead and get one of these really front row seats or get some of these side seats? I'm going to get some in these back corner over here. That's weird. That seems like the seats that are getting bought out aren't seats that people would choose to sit in. That's weird, right? That's really weird. So let's look a little bit at this. I decided to dive into this. Let's go ahead and do the full dive. Let's look at this pay it forward scheme. And if you're wondering, Matt Jarbo also has a fantastic stream on this. He does with Dane. But here, I'll do my own investigation as well. Okay, so if you want to get a ticket to see Sound of Freedom, you have this weird website. I've never seen this type thing before. It's the pay it forward system. Apparently 14 million tickets have been sold through this system. Jesus, this number just keeps on getting higher and higher. So 14 million tickets. What's the math on that? Hold on, give me a couple moments. This number keeps on getting higher and higher. Let's look at the math on this. So 14 million. And then average ticket price in America, I've looked this up, it's $10.25 per ticket. So that would be $143.5 million at the box office. Okay, so Sound of Freedom. So through Pay It Forward, it would have made about $143 million. Domestic box office, $155 million. That's weird. That's very weird. Now, this whole thing's suspicious. I think this seating chart, we showed it before, I'll show it again. This is weird. So, all the seats that nobody would want to sit in are the ones that sold. What is this? It's suspicious. I don't know what else to say. But anyways, just looking at the raw numbers, this is all very suspicious. It wouldn't surprise me if something comes out about this movie, but I don't know. But you know what? One thing I want to do is look at Jim Caviezel a bit here. Because Jim Caviezel did this interview with Charlie Kirk. And there is some wild shit said during this interview. So let's check this out.
Joining us now is Jim Caviezel, who is really going viral in a lot of different ways with the incredibly important, powerful film Sound of Freedom. Jim, thank you so much for making time to join the program.
Great to be here, Charlie. And I'm grateful to you for all the tremendous...
Oh, another fun fact. I actually, we went over it on the initiative bit. So, what they'll do is essentially, so Crawling Chaos has talked about, essentially it's like a coupon. So you give the movie theater a coupon for a movie ticket. Now, what happens to that movie ticket? Well, the theater gets some of it, and then some of it goes back to the studio. So essentially, the studio is giving you money, and the studio will get some of that money back, which is interesting setup. That's good tax write-off strategy, too.
Work you've done and really living your faith out. Because
thank you.
We're at a point here where if the Christians don't stand up, our republic is finished.
I totally agree. And so first, talk about your personal faith and how that played a role in your decision to want to do this film.
Well, look, I never talked about this for a long time publicly, but at this point, I think the gloves have to come off. I was in a movie theater when I was probably 19 years old. I had probably 14 where I reached a point where I really considered, taking my own life. And I was running on a frontage road barefoot, and I ran about 8 miles, and my feet were all cut up. I remember just so angry in my heart. It was like, you can't hurt me kind of a thing. And I just cried out to God to help me, and I was in a movie theater, and that loving God came to me, and I felt like I was the only child this God had. And if I had done that, would have been a sad moment, because our Lord would probably showed me what he had for me, and that I was going to play his son. So and I tell that to people.
So, I mean, he's at a low point, and he contemplated suicide. I want to go ahead and stress, we all have, like so many of us will have that low point, and it's important that we work through it. That's important. I'm glad he worked through it. This will go off the rails soon.
Especially now, because the kids are, it's like 5 times worse of suicides now of young people. If nothing, we've given them nothing, no God in schools, nothing. But I'm talking about a Christian God, Jesus God, and there's nowhere for them to find it. And so, long story short, he asked me to become an actor, and I was given a purpose, and I thought, I don't know how to do that, but if I didn't believe in myself, but I believed in him, and I believe if he said I could do something, I could do it. And so came to the industry. And
I mean, I'll be frank, I always knew Jim Caviezel was a religious person. The fact that he's very religious has been brought up in interviews and stuff before, but this is way more hardcore than I ever thought.
And it was rough, 10 years, but he protected me, and it was a hard route to take, and it's never changed. It's still really hard, but it's a purpose, though. And like that book, The Purpose-Driven Life, these are what the saints are, people that live in a purpose. And it's better than any money or cash or wealth, power. That's something deep inside, a love that I've was just would die for. And on the 33rd year of my life, the initials of JC, Mel Gibson, asked me to play Jesus in this film, and I
guess it's fairly simple, but just being like, hey, Jim Caviezel, Jesus Christ, we're like the same person, right? It's a little cringe, man.
Tell people this because it was really important, because there are a lot of people in the industry that called me and told me not to do the movie. And I read the script. It was everything in the movie was in the Gospels. And I began to understand.
I'll be frank. I have not seen Passion of the Christ. To my understanding, it's a well-made movie, and what I've seen segments of it that I think are well-made. But it also, what I've also seen, it's comes off kind of like almost like I almost want to say almost comes off kind of like a snuff movie. Like it's about just beating the ever-loving shit out of Jesus. It's like, what fun?
That they don't like those Gospels. They don't like it. And, but nonetheless, I really didn't have anywhere else to go other than to go to him, because that's the only place I know. So we did the movie.
So Jim, we share a common faith in Jesus Christ and in ultimate truth, and in the promise of John 10:10, juxtaposed of what the enemy wishes to do: lie, steal, and destroy, and Christ comes to give life and life more abundantly. What is it about Hollywood where they get so up in arms about the issue of child sex trafficking?
I missed that. In fact, there was a movie called Taken. It was mildly successful a few years ago. That was really popular. That didn't get any real pushback that I recall. But Sound of Freedom got pushback not because of the topic, but because there's lots of financial practices behind it that are sus. There's lots of QAnon connections to it, which Jim's very much one of those. I'm kind of sick of reframing Sound of Freedom as if it's somehow the movie about, if you watch this, you're saving children. You're not. It's a movie made and financed by right-wing grifters. I don't know how else to say it. It's bluntly that.
I would have thought, if I was just kind of uninitiated in this space, that Hollywood would at least be neutral on your film. Why are they so opposed, so frantic in antagonizing Sound of Freedom? What's going on here?
Well, I'll give you an example, Charlie. We were about 4 years ago, we showed the movie, and this has been a 5-year deal. And they've done everything they could to stop it, as they did this with The Passion of the Christ. About 4 years ago, we showed it.
Passion of the Christ was a pretty big box office hit. What are you talking about? They did everything they could to stop it. What? I don't recall actually really much of anything behind Passion of the Christ. That was a hit, to my understanding.
Theater, there was like 5 viewings. And in each viewing, they were always talking during this one part, the audience. And I thought, maybe there's something wrong. I'd never seen that before. And about 1,500 people at the end, I spoke to them and I asked them, what that was. And they all yelled out Epstein Island. And then I said, okay, now I understand.
So funny fact, we will be discussing Epstein's Island here in a little bit. Not actually for this topic, though. When we go on to just pearly things, that'll become relevant. But it's weird how it connects.
We're shining a light on something they don't want shined on. And, this has been around for a long, long time. Biblically, it's been around, what they did to children during the time of Moses and, again, during the time of Jesus. Yes. And what we've been doing now. 27 days now, they're going to be able to kill a baby. 27 days.
I went ahead and found the thing about the California law. Headline: misrepresents a California reproductive health bill. Claim: a California bill will allow mothers to kill their babies up to 7 days after birth. AP assessment: false. A bill in the California legislature, AB 2223, is being falsely represented as it was introduced to provide legal protection to women who lose their child to pregnancy complications and those who have abortions. It does not legalize the killing of infants. Facts: social media users are sharing a headline that falsely suggests the proposed California bill would legalize infanticide and killing of an infant. California introduces a new bill that would allow mothers to kill their babies up to 7 days after birth. Oh my God. Reads the erroneous headline on a story published by the Miami Standard, a conservative website. To everyone saying it's fake because it was posted on 4/1, do some research. 9% of all don't stay in California. Dude, it was published on April 1st. Oh my God. It's called the Infanticide Bill, claimed a Facebook post sharing a screenshot of the headline on April 1st with over 11,000 screen shares. God, you can't even do an obvious joke thing without people freaking out over it. Let's see if I can find the other thing, because he doesn't state exactly what it is. So I want to go ahead, because I think there's a different law, and we'll go ahead and cover that one. Here we go. This is actually a video done by like a local news station that dives into this. Does a good job.
Verify viewers know that before you share, you verify. We got tagged in this Instagram post right here, which claims that a new Maryland abortion bill would, quote, allow babies to be killed up to 28 days after birth. So let's verify, is that true? Here are our sources: Dr. Priya Rajan from Northwestern, Maryland State Delegate Nicole Williams, and the bill itself. The claim centers around one line in the original bill, which says that someone can't be investigated or penalized for, quote, experiencing perinatal death related to a failure to act. Now, perinatal refers to the time period just before birth to the time just after. And depending on who you ask, that period can end 7 days or 28 days after birth. Critics say that this provision legalizes all newborn deaths, including intentional ones. The House bill's sponsor says that was not the intent of this bill.
This bill in no way, shape, or form would allow individuals to kill babies. That's called homicide.
So we went to Dr. Rajan for context. She says the bill is to protect families from legal action in very rare, very difficult circumstances.
For instance, someone has an extremely preterm birth, say at 20 weeks gestation, and that infant is born with a heartbeat, but really has no meaningful chance of survival down the road, or it would require extreme interventions. And a family may say, if there's a very high chance that it might pass away, I don't want the time that this child has on earth to be full of suffering in that way.
Delegate Williams says that she has since introduced an amendment to try and make this more clear, so we can verify that this claim is misleading. The bill does not allow people to kill baby.
So, I mean, yeah, it's tough to judge because I don't know exactly what Caviezel is referencing to, but yeah, there's nothing like that. Nobody supports killing a baby. It's clearly just pushing buzzwords.
Days after they're born. Why would you kill a baby 27? Why would you kill a baby anyway? But why 27 days? Now they always talk about the mother's right to choose. The mother, in case of the mother's life's in danger. So now think about it. Baby's next to her. Doctor walks in, puts a sword through the child, kills it. Does the mother become healthy because of that? How does that work?
So again, like as we just saw in that video, he's doing an appeal to emotion here, which it's a weird visual. Like I visualize a doctor walking up a fucking broadsword and killing a baby. It's like, the fuck? Like it's like sword. Why? That's weird imagery anyway. But yeah, like we just went over, we're talking about like a baby like who might be like born really early, who is suffering, that has like little to no chance of survival. And if they survive, they're going to be in misery their entire life. And just not punishing the mother for making that difficult choice. Because the thing that anti-abortion activists like to pretend like is a thing, nobody likes abortion. Nobody likes it. Nobody is a fan of abortion at all. But the fact is, there are times where it's medically necessary. And let's face it, woman has autonomy over her own body. So there's certain things that have to be given away. There's a reason why nobody calls himself pro-abortion. It's pro-choice. It's important. But yeah, obviously, Caviezel here likes to frame it doctors with broadswords killing babies, apparently.
And then I talked to Tim Ballard immensely about organ harvesting. This trafficking is just the beginning of this whole thing. It's an 8-armed octopus, and if you take just trafficking out, that arm will grow back. You have to take the head. And we're talking grooming. We're talking...
Well, I mean, it's worth talking about that, like, taking the head isn't something that Tim Ballard does. We went over a bit on the initiative stream, but, like, essentially he just, like, goes into small towns and is, like, essentially going around looking for these guys by, like, asking for, like, child sex slaves, essentially. And when you do that, you create a market for that type of thing, which can be troublesome. It's why you don't typically look for them in that manner. But at best, even if he finds them, he's cutting off an arm. So, literally, this argument is essentially what Tim Ballard does. He cuts off arms. He's not going for the head. There are actually groups and organizations that go for the head. And Tim Ballard will interrupt that shit.
About pornography, because pornography procures more pedophiles. And then It's a nonstop cycle. So this
And this thing with pornography, obviously he's against pornography. I think it's fine. Pornography is fine. Obviously not child pornography. That's gross and disgusting. But like pornography in general, as long as there's consent and adults involved, I have no problem with.
is a culture that has to be reawakened. And I don't know. And I've said this many times, more people now are more afraid of the devil, Christians. I'm talking about Christians now, more afraid of the devil than they are of God.
So this line just bugs the shit out of me because it confuses me. So like, it's tough to get his exact meaning, but he seems to be saying that Christians being afraid of the devil, more afraid of the devil than they are of God, is a bad thing. That's his framing right now, that like Christians should be more afraid of God than the devil. Which is, I don't even know how to fully digest that take. It's just so weird. Like, isn't the devil supposed to be the source of like evil in the world? But yet, you want Christians to be more afraid of God? It feels like very Old Testament type stuff. Kind of crazy.
I look to the biblical St. Paul. I look to St. John the Baptist. Both got their head taken off. That's okay with me. Paul says to live is Christ, to die is gain. Well, I know I'm going to die someday. And everything that I have on this earth, the Rolex watch that I have, is not going to float up into the heavens. It's all junk up there. I know one day I'm going to be there in front of that loving God, and I'm going to give everything I have for him. Isn't that what we're supposed to do? Or are we just supposed to sit back and stay on the fence? And as my friend says, the devil owns that fence. Lukewarm Christianity, that's not Christianity. And so we're the ones that have to lead, because it has to come from the people, and it has to come from a spirit where we're fearless. And when love comes in the heart to such a level that you would die.
Morgan, I would be interested in that Fabcast, because I'm not really a religious scholar. I just know the Old Testament is like very old school, like hardcore shit where God's like smiting people left and right. That's kind of what I know. I did once seriously try to read the Bible, and I couldn't get past all the begatting. Like they are fucking like mad at the beginning of the Bible, and it's not like exciting or anything. It's just lots of fucking and pages and pages of fucking and just no story.
Die for it. But wouldn't you die for your children at least? Maybe you wouldn't die for your republic. You wouldn't die for your country. Okay, fine. But what about your children? Would you just hand them over? And so America right now and the world, when they see this, they're being reawakened because the media has lied too many times. And this is the strand that broke the camel's back. That's what you're seeing right now.
So Jim, 2 minutes left in this segment. The media is trying to smear the film, call it QAnon adjacent, seducing America, all that nonsense. That is.
I mean, we've already seen Jim is pretty QAnon, so if he's involved in the movie, that makes it QAnon adjacent by just fact.
Nothing more than the enemy mobilizing unclean spirits, principalities of darkness against the light. You are fulfilling Ephesians 5:11, have nothing to do with the fruitless deeds of darkness, but rather expose them. Jim, can you just give us a little bit of a window from your experience and your understanding?
Wait, what is this? So type the word Sound of Freedom into Twitter. Decent people who wish to live good, happy lives should, under no circumstances, actually do this. And the search will yield dozens of triumphant reports crowing about the improbable victory of a film that, by that title, over the likes of Indiana Jones of the box office at the weekend. I mean, probably. I mean, Twitter's become Nazi central at this point, so it doesn't surprise me at all.
Standing, How widespread is child sex trafficking in Hollywood?
That one I'll talk about in the future. That one, it's a good question. It's there. I'll talk about it more in the future.
Well, I mean, as with all conspiracy theories, and we'll discuss this over the stream because there's more to go into. Does it exist? Yes, absolutely. Some Hollywood people, some rich people, yes, it does absolutely exist. Is it everywhere? Is it everybody? Absolutely not. Is it even a majority? Absolutely not. It exists, but it doesn't mean it's everybody and it's everywhere. But yes.
My stuff came more from the agents
Mm-hmm.
and the guys that I've worked with. And screaming of children is...
What? Let's talk about his agents. What?
Well, there's something in me that says that ain't going to happen on my watch because I have a father that's inside my heart and I'll go after these bastards. And it's okay to be that. And that's why the line's in there. Better a millstone being hung around their necks, that they be cast into the sea, that they should ever hurt one of these little ones. And that's what's coming for them. It's going to be a wrath on them. There will be no forgiveness because this is the rejection of the Holy Spirit. It's the only unforgivable sin.
You shall not blaspheme the Holy Spirit. Angel.com/Jim is the...
I think it's interesting seeing Charlie Kirk's response to this because it's like it's a bit too deep even for him because I get the sense, looking at these two, what I've seen of Charlie Kirk is pure, hardcore Republican right-wing grifter. Piece of shit, for sure. But, like, he kind of knows the grift. Caviezel here is coming off like just hardcore believer. Just kind of fucking mental. It's interesting dynamic going on here.
Website. Jim, we have you for another segment here on this unbelievably heavy topic. It's heavy. There's a Hebrew word for this, chabed, which means to honor or be heavy. It's almost greater than what some people can handle, but it's necessary and it's not talked about enough. And if you want evidence that we are in a spiritual war, just look at the irrational response that the media is administering.
And notice how they keep on saying this. Like, the media is attacking this because they don't want people to know about child sex trafficking, as if the world didn't know about child sex trafficking until this movie came out, which is absurd statement. Absolutely fucking absurd. Child sex trafficking is something that is pretty universally known about and pretty universally hated. It's a disgusting thing that does exist, but it's like nobody's supporting it. And pointing out that Sound of Freedom's numbers are sus as fuck is not the same as supporting child sex trafficking. That those two do not link to each other.
For a film that should be received with agreement, celebration, and at the very least, neutrality. But why does the media have to send their attack dogs? Not one outlet, by the way. Rolling Stone.
Because the way it's making its money is sus as fuck.
Guardian, one after the other. Really makes you wonder what the heck they're doing in their personal lives, what they're aware of.
Wow. No wonder people on Twitter were calling me like pedo and pro child sex trafficking when the grifters, the prominent grifters say shit like that. It makes you wonder the people who criticize it, what's going on in their personal life. Dude, we're looking at the numbers and we're pointing out that sus as fuck.
They're defending. Jim Caviezel continues after the break. It's angel.com/Jim. So, Jim, we only have a minute in this segment, then we have another segment just right after. Can you just give us a little insight? How successful has Sound of Freedom been in the last week and a half?
Well, it could have been a lot bigger, and I wanted it to be bigger. But you guys in the news, the good news, and the people are the ones that are keeping this thing going. And I think the other side is, I was doing interviews for 3 weeks and nothing was even mentioned. They just ignored us the whole time. In fact, a friend of mine in Seattle said, I don't know if it was the Seattle PI, I think it was, where they listed films that were opening up and we weren't even listed. And we were going to win the box office and we weren't even listed. So there's a group of people that want to make sure that this isn't around. I don't know.
Again, he's not getting into details. A group of people want to make sure this isn't around. Who? Because all I see is a very suspicious way this movie's making money. Ticket sales where like border seats are selling out and like the middle, like the prime seats are like fine. Which is very suspicious. A pay it forward scheme that just, who knows where they're getting that money from. And that scheme could account for a vast majority of this movie's box office. And this is anecdotal, of course, but like in real life, I know nobody who was aware of Sound of Freedom before I mentioned it to him. Nobody. But online, it's like all these people are chattering about it. It has this artificial tinge to it. And yes, there are clear QAnon connections to this movie. Absolutely.
If this segment goes, I don't, go ahead and interrupt me.
Just hold that thought. We have 20 seconds, but I want to encourage people to go to angel.com/Jim. If you've already seen the film and you have the resources to do it, go bring 2 friends and see it again. We must make this film the #1 film in America for as long as possible. I believe it is a moral good the more you support this film. Instead of going out to dinner, go see the movie again.
Why? Like we actually even looked it up. So like the surplus money that gets pumped in this movie is going to support putting the movie on streaming. None of the proceeds of this movie are going to go towards fighting child trafficking at all. So like this idea, it's a moral good to watch this movie. How? You could watch Taken and get the same vibe and probably get a better fucking movie.
And Sound of Freedom. Stay right there. Jim Caviezel, continue your thought.
Now, I actually noticed there that's like there's some Peter Gabriel's Sledgehammer seems to be playing there, which I think is interesting. I doubt Peter Gabriel would be thrilled to have his song being played during Charlie Kirk. Peter Gabriel's a pretty famous left-winger. So, yeah, just interesting factoid.
Tell me where I was. No, when I was talking about the media and they're ignoring the stories. I'll give you a perfect example. On April 26, Ms. Rodas gave sworn testimony, and I've used this many times. 85,000 children have crossed the border and disappeared. That's sworn testimony. That's also evidence that has been submitted. And I talked to Tim, and he says it's actually much bigger than this. But anyway, the next day, I think that's newsworthy. And the next day in the news, nothing, absolutely nothing. And so, but we've seen this over and over again in the media. You said ivermectin's bad. That's listed under the NIH.
Ivermectin is not used to treat COVID. It's bad for treating COVID. Nobody said there are treatments for that ivermectin is 100% valid for. It's just not COVID. That's why people said it was bad, because during a pandemic, people were pushing the idea that you get ivermectin to treat COVID. There were some doctors experimenting with it, and the results showed pretty much no effect. But the scary thing is there are people going to pet stores, because there's over-the-counter ivermectin you can get for your pet. And they were getting that and using it on themselves and getting injured, and I don't know if anybody died from that. That was extremely dangerous. So people are saying, no, don't get ivermectin for your COVID. But yeah, you know what, Jim? Let's just ignore that and say media said ivermectin's bad, but it's fine. Let's ignore all the nuance and context and just throw out buzzwords.
Hydroxychloroquine is bad for us. That's listed under the NIH.
Again, people were using it to treat COVID because Donald Trump kept on pushing that shit, and it's not valid for treating COVID. It's bullshit for treating COVID. Quit ignoring context, bro.
Adrenochrome. That's not true. It's C9H9NO3.
Oh, yeah, and he just brought up adrenochrome there. We kind of went over it briefly there, but I guess it'll be good for me to actually say it right now. Adrenochrome is a substance that's used in laboratory research, but it's not a drug, except in one instance. And that instance is the Hunter S. Thompson novel, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas.
What is this shit?
That stuff makes pure mescaline seem like ginger beer, man. Ginger beer? Adrenochrome.
It's a coincidence that was an actual substance because he made it up. That's part of the reason why in the pre-stream I was having those clips of the movie where he's taking adrenochrome. It's a made-up drug. And in the novel he references you have to get it from a live human being, which is how QAnon people talk about how you get adrenochrome from children. And it's all bullshit. That's not how it works. Using it as a drug it's fictionalized from a fictional book. It's not real shit. And
this is a chemical compound that is absolutely listed. It's been around in modern science since the 1930s. You can actually, there's a synthetic form and there's a regular natural form, which is caused by torturing little kids.
Nope, that's not true.
To get their adrenaline up, essentially, and then extracting it from them. When you sit and meet, and so I brought this up a few years ago, and all of a sudden I was attacked by every media. Look it up. It's there. They absolutely went after me. And the next day, I never heard from my agency for 14 months.
It might have been because you were saying wild conspiracies with no basis in reality.
My lawyers let me go. My agency never called me after that. And essentially I was done. And so when we go and do movies like this, you spend a great deal of time with agents, working with them. I didn't realize the connection, though, to my industry and to Epstein Island and all of that.
Wow. Just drop Epstein Island in there. So are there celebrities that were involved with Epstein's Island? Yes, we're going to go over a list of those, actually. It's not a ton, but they definitely exist. But it's like he's trying to associate, I'm against child sex trafficking, and that's why I was blacklisted. No. Dude, you were clearly blacklisted because you're saying crazy QAnon shit. Talking about adrenochrome the way you are just shows that, you haven't researched anything. You're just believing what probably some 4chan website is regurgitating out to you.
But obviously there is. And I couldn't sleep for 2 years after doing that movie. 2 years. In the middle of the night. Horrible nightmares. Something hard that happens to you in your life, you can either fade away or turn and fight. And I've decided to fight back because those precious children are God, and I'd give my life for God.
So starring in a movie about child trafficking saves children. Okay.
I'm talking about the Jesus Christ God. Okay. The QAnon stuff. Jim's QAnon. Well, let's look into that because that could be really evil.
So, just FYI, we're about ready to go on a roller coaster.
Somewhere in Congress, they said QAnon is racist. Okay. Well, we don't like that, right? But so is the Ku Klux Klan. And that's another letter. It's a K. We don't like the letter Q. We don't like the letter K, but they don't go after the letter K.
I wasn't aware they didn't go after the letter K.
And I started looking into Senator Byrd, and he was a grand wizard. Hillary Clinton's tied to him, and Joe Biden's tied to him. Now, understand, this is a Ku Klux Klan here. And there is a lot of data that can prove that the Ku Klux Klan is an evil organization. And so are the Nazis. One could say that they're also racist, but they don't go after those. Only the QAnon.
I didn't know that either. We've never gone after Nazis. We've never gone after the I did not know this. I did not know this at all.
Now, by way of analogy,
about 1 minute remaining. Yep.
If I were the apostle,
it's like Jim is like going off the rails, and Charlie's like, oh, 1 minute, man, come on.
Saul, and I'm a Pharisee. I'm going to go after the Christians. I'm going to take them down. Now remove Christians and let's make it QAnon. I'm going to destroy them because the Romans told me they're evil. I'm going to destroy them.
I'm sorry. The Romans told him. Yes, I was told by a Roman that QAnon is evil. I didn't just look at it and go, well, that's crazy. No, Romans told me.
Because my own church staff, my fellow Pharisee said, evil. I'm going to take him out. And then you find out it's not QAnon, it's Q and Anons. And Q puts out a question, and you're not allowed to ask questions anymore. Not allowed to. And the Anons, they look it all up. And they start looking and investigating this stuff. I never knew about them while I was doing this movie, Sound of Freedom. It has nothing to do with our film. But it's really interesting that they pointed to this immediately and said, that guy's...
I find it really interesting you're claiming you don't know anything about him, but you're clearly like running defense for him. That's interesting. If you don't know about him, why run defense?
One of them, he's bad. I'll tell you the rest after that. Break.
Jim, we have to have you back soon. I'm sorry we're out of time. Angel.com/Jim.
But yeah, Jim Caviezel is insane. I don't know how else to say it. So what? Crawling Chaos. I have an older movie with Jim Weasel that I actually like. I feel like dumping it in the garbage right now. Dude, I'll go ahead and say this right now. Jim Caviezel was in a series a few years ago called Person of Interest. That series, what I've seen of it, I haven't seen the whole thing, is solid. He was in early 2000s, he was in The Count of Monte Cristo. Solid fucking flick. Awesome. He was in Frequency with Dennis Quaid. Like, I want to say that was late 90s, or maybe that was early 2000s as well. Solid flick as well. He is a good actor. Now, I would never, ever watch anything he does now, because he's off the deep end and insane. But it doesn't mean he isn't a good actor, and it doesn't mean that everything just because he's insane now and doing bad stuff now doesn't mean everything he's ever done is bad. So, like, if you enjoy his older movies, go enjoy them. Just understand, like, anything new he does is going to almost undoubtedly be coated in this QAnon propaganda shit.
Books, records, films, these things matter. Call me shallow. It's the fucking truth.